Thank you everybody for tuning in to Voices of Liberty. Today we have a special guest, and what's neat about this guest is she's in the studio. Kristin Tate is with me, and she's a young libertarian. She got interested in libertarianism when she was in high school. When I was in high school, I hadn't even heard of anything like that, so I think the young people are way ahead of where I was when I was a teenager or in college. But Kristin, thank you for being here. I'm delighted to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's good. Now, you told me a little while ago that you actually got some interest when you were in high school. You were living in New Hampshire.
Absolutely right. Actually, my interest for libertarianism was sparked when I saw you speak. I think you were speaking at UNH or some large gathering, and I kind of grew up not knowing what my political beliefs were. My dad was more of a traditional Republican, and my mom tended to be a little bit more liberal, and I always took issue with one side or the other.
Did you have any one issue that was more of a challenge, that you leaned more towards your dad or more towards your mother?
Yes, actually. I did struggle at first with the war on drugs, just because I do know some people personally whose lives have been ruined by drugs. But I thought about it, I mulled over this for many years, and I thought their lives were ruined by drugs while those very drugs were illegal. So what are these laws banning the drugs doing? Are they preventing people from taking the drugs? They're not, clearly. I've seen people's lives ruined by them while they're illegal. So why do we need these laws in place? We're creating an unsafe underground cartel, and we're creating a market for criminals, really. So,
and you know, the other argument for that is how many lives have been ruined by innocent people using drugs, mildly so, and getting put in prison and become hardened criminals. So there were more victims of the drug war than
absolutely.
Now, you also told me that you did an internship with John Stossel. That ought to have been interesting. And that was what, like 6 months or so? Or?
Yeah, I did a 6-month internship with John Stossel. It was one of the best experiences of my life. I didn't really think that I wanted to go into media at first, and then I ended up applying for the internship and got it, and I just saw how important it is that we have voices in the media that are really pushing these ideas of liberty, because it's really interesting. We of course have the mostly liberal dominated mainstream media, and then we have Fox News, which tends to be more, you know, establishment Republican, and we need voices like John Stossel in the media. And it's so wonderful that we have these alternative media sources popping up online, like the Ron Paul channel, to get these critical ideas out to young people.
Yeah, but in a way, you know, when people ask me what to do, you know, I'm sort of a little bit flippant. Do whatever you want to do. And one suggestion is get into the media, and you've done that.
Absolutely, and my hope is that I can be a voice for the new millennials who really feel like they don't have a voice in the mainstream media. And Breitbart's been great about letting me get these ideas out there, even if they don't necessarily agree with everything that I believe in. It's been a really good channel for me to get these things out.
You've also had an interest, since you're in Texas, and it's a big issue nationally, you know, is the immigration problem.
Right.
And that's one that, you know, is not so simple, because you can go from totally open borders to modified open borders and very restrictive borders, and at least the Tea Party people are all over the place, and even libertarians will debate this issue. But since you've been here, and I understand you'll be making a trip down into the valley and doing some more reporting and on site, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what I've seen is that our country is unfortunately incentivizing people to come over our borders illegally, because we're literally subsidizing every need of every single person who comes over our border. And that includes everything from recreation, vocational training, English lessons, even just general counseling for people with mental problems. And if you live in Honduras or, you know, Guatemala, some Central American country, and you have a very poor quality of life, and you hear, oh, if you go up to America, you can have all of these things, you can go to a wonderful school, you can stay in a nice person's house, of course you're going to want to go. I would probably do the same thing if I lived down there. We're giving them incentives to come. And unfortunately, it's not very humanitarian when you really look at the situation, because hundreds of young people are losing their lives on the journey from Central America to our border. It's very dangerous. They're crossing through Mexico, which is full of cartels. They're killing these children. And we're telling them, come on over, we'll pay, if you get here, we'll pay for everything.
Milton Friedman was correct on this argument. It becomes more difficult to handle the immigration problem if the welfare state exists, and that's exactly what happens. So if the welfare state exists, that's one part about it, but if you have a shaky economy, that's another thing, because it becomes jobs and people have an incentive not to work up here, and then the burden is so much greater. If people were coming and going into a libertarian society, which was part of our early history, you know, they came and they had a sponsor and they were on their own, and the assimilation was much better.
That's exactly right. We want people to come here and to work. We want immigrants like that. What we don't want are more leeches taking from the taxpayers. And unfortunately, the entitlement mentality has now gone international. We've told people across the world, come on over, we'll pay your way for everything. And again, Milton Friedman once said, you can have open borders or you can have a welfare state, but you can't have both.
You've been interested in the immigration, and you've been in Houston for a year now. So what else have you been writing about? What's the next subject that's catching your attention right now that you found interesting?
I've been really interested lately in government corruption, and I've been looking into a program called Job Corps recently. Have you heard of that?
Not the details.
It's a program for underprivileged high school students, and essentially the government takes them in, gives them housing and a stipend, and helps them, gives them vocational training to sort of send them off into the world with their GED. It sounds great on the surface of it, but I've started to do some digging, and I've come to find a really disturbing trend in these places, which is, not totally surprisingly, a complete lack of accountability.
Yeah.
The administrators at these places, have been accused of not reporting cases of rape, drug use, and other behavior on these campuses, and also passing students who don't have the grades of a 5th grader, giving them their GED, because the more students that they graduate, the more government funding they get.
To justify their existence.
Exactly. So I've been doing a lot of digging into that. I've put up some articles on it on Breitbart, and I'm going to keep digging.
Obviously, man is imperfect, and there's always these problems, private or government. But I think what you point out there, when it's government, it's hard to find out.
Oh, my whole job is trying to get information from the government, and we hire these people whose entire job it is to be media relations for every government agency, and they never pick up their phones. And if they do pick up their phones, they won't give you any information, even though we're paying their salaries with our tax dollars. It's incredible.
Just think of a private company practice extortion and a few other things. And a few other things the IRS has practiced. I mean, they get closed down rather quickly. But when the government does it, you know, they just go on and on. And
there's no accountability. No one's ever fired. It's rarely ever fired, and no one's ever held accountable for what goes on.
That's, of course, is a good argument for keeping the government out of these things, because it invites corruption. But when they mess up, not only is it secret, it's more pervasive, and it hurts everybody. You know, if a single person causes problems, it's usually much narrower. You know, a lot of the liberals say, well, you know, such and such, if they have this in private, you know, they can mess up, which is true. But what if you put these same kind of people in charge in Washington, and then it just magnifies it and institutionalizes it and makes it secret?
It becomes a culture of corruption.
You know, and I think the exposure is very important. I get a little pessimistic about us weaning ourselves off. I mean, if you wanted to get rid of Jobs Corps, if you go to Washington and say, okay, yeah, we agree with you, we're going to cut that budget 10% a year until it's gone. It never happened. Oh, never happened.
Government only grows. Yeah. That's what John Stossel told me.
So it's more likely growing 10% every year.
It does. Every year their budget increases despite.
And that, of course, is the reason why I emphasize so much the monetary policy, because you can't expand. You can't pay for government. You can't pay for the wars. You can't pay for the welfare if you're not allowed to print the money.
Right.
And at the rate we're going, though, it'll end, because it's not viable. It's not a viable system. Finally, you cause so much economic chaos that you know, a bankruptcy comes. So I'm afraid your generation might be you know, facing that. But tell me about your friends at your age group and how they see you. Are you thinking more people are respecting your views, or do you feel like you're a lone person when it comes to the young people?
Unfortunately, I mean, okay, I do have a close group of friends, and I know a lot of young people who are very open to liberty, and I think there's a huge growing movement of liberty lovers who are young, and that's a lot thanks to you, Dr. Paul. You've been really great at connecting with young people, something Republicans are really horrible at, by the way, and the internet is really helping that. Unfortunately, though, there's another large population of young people who are completely oblivious to what's going on in this country. I graduated from college last year in Boston, and I can tell you that the vast majority of young people in our colleges are completely clueless. They have no idea what's going on. They have no interest in the debt, in fiscal issues, anything like that. As long as they have their iPads and their iPhones and
their music.
Yeah, their music and their MacBooks, they're all good. They do have very strong opinions on social issues, though, because they're easy to connect with. Yeah. So a lot of young people are very pro-gay marriage or pro-abortion because there are faces we can all connect with those issues, and they're easier to grasp. So I have found young people are pretty mobilized on those. But in terms of the fiscal stuff, which is, in my view, very important in the welfare state, they could not care less. But
tell you what, and I've talked about this a lot, is we don't sit around and worrying about that, you know, the percentages, because what we want is the 7 to 8, 9% of the people like you who will be in a leadership position, intellectual leadership, and you're on your way to doing this, because that's what changes the other's opinion. The other's one that you're talking about, they go along, you know, and if they think it's in their best interest, or they don't have a strong objection to it, I mean, they go along with welfare because they think it's in their best interest, but eventually it won't be in their best interest. So that's why the 51% of endorsement is important, but I think that we have to concentrate on this intellectual leadership, and that, of course, is why I spend as much time on education as I do in politics.
Absolutely, and I think another important thing to add here is that when these young people go to work, a lot of them do start to understand the importance of lower taxes and government spending, because they start earning a paycheck and the reality hits them that, oh, my money's all being taken, where is it going? Oh, we have a huge welfare state, you know, it's eye-opening.
What about the eye-opening of some of your friends probably graduated and owed some money for their education and had trouble getting a job? That ought to open their eyes too, that debt is bad.
Absolutely.
And that the jobs aren't out there because you don't understand economics. Anyway, you know, I think it's great. I'm delighted that you were able to come in here, and I'm delighted you're excited about this and moving along and participating, and that even when you were in high school, you got interested. So I have high hopes for individuals like you. And matter of fact, that's what keeps me going, is young people will respond when they get the chance. And like I said, you don't have to worry about the total numbers. You need to get that core group, and that is what's happening. So I want to thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you. You're one of my heroes. So I hope to continue to spread your message and get more young people on board with our liberty movement.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. It was a delight to have Kristin with us. She's a typical example of all young people in the world. When the world has changed, the United States comes back to its senses. But no, it is very encouraging to me to meet people like Kristin, because she's very serious, she's involved, and she's in the media. So I think it's just wonderful. There's days when I am a little bit pessimistic, when things don't seem to be improving. But overall, you know, I've talked so much about being very positive that there is a shift, and the young people are starting to realize. So I think it's very encouraging to have a conversation with an individual like Kristin. Thank you for tuning in today, and come back to Voices of Liberty soon.